I don't know if I've made the statement on this channel yet, but there's a certain brand in off-road machines. Now, there is some limitation to my experience about some other brands, but no brand has pissed me off more than this brand right here. See, right there, Polaris. This one, Polaris. Got a nice row of junk Polarises. The snowmobiles up there in the loft, they're Polaris. And they run more or less fine. It's not much in the way of issues with them. Everything's fine. Not designed, not the best for maintenance, but it's not terrible for what the machines are. And for the use, how the use is on them, not bad for all things considered. But Polaris is not a good four-wheeler company, at least not 90s into 2000s. The ones I've experienced with, terrible. Never worked on this one, but it's had issues. I worked on a couple year older 400 Sportsman. It was horrible. Trailblazer, horrible. Yeah, sort of a pinnacle. This one here is kind of like a pinnacle of Polaris such stupidity. So you got this carburetor. It actually goes in the engine, or the compartment this way, under a gas tank. So you have to take this off. I pried this up, the mass amount of force, enough to damage or break it, to pry that out so I don't have to take this entire assembly off, because that card, this comes off, a bunch of RS I took off comes off. This has attachments all the way up around and under, they have to undo. Even just to I did take half of them off. I don't want to take all of them off, it's a pain. But here's this carburetor, because I was pouring gas out. This is the engine side. There's an adjustment screw right here. So, just say if you move, is an altitude change, or just for whatever reason you need to adjust the idle jet. Okay, this goes here. So, the screw is about right here. How are you going to adjust that? This is what we're looking at. Within an inch is where the base of that is. It's going to be just about to there, down. So you'll have maybe an inch to work with if you have like pulled all these parts out, pulled this off, side panels come off. Like, there's no way to adjust the carburetor. And even for machines like this, with this type of configuration, you don't do both at this and then the airbox. You don't do both the clamps. You twist the carburetor over, and then you can get access to the screw, pull the carb bolt depending on the case. Can't do that. This piece here mounts onto the frame directly to these, and the only way to undo it is to pull the gas tank off and undo the studs. You couldn't undo it the other way because these screws are behind the frame. There's no through holes to easily access. Undo those. Yeah. It's a brand that can make snowmobiles, but if I compare to the two big Japanese brands for four-wheelers, Polaris and not Polaris, stupid American brand, junk, Yamaha and Honda. Now, I have worked in both of those. Most Yamaha engines are directly upright or slightly tilted forward, not this ridiculous tilt like this with the carburetor directly against the cooling fins almost. So, and also the sides are either covered but easily accessible. They don't have all this junk clambered around from the ones I've worked on. They have a lot of them with the manual transmission or semi-auto. Honda, they'll have a mechanical auto. I don't know how many have CVTs, but Hondas typically have their engines, from what I've seen, standing directly upright for just a semi-utility machine, not necessarily sport. Here's an example of the flaw of Polaris. This machine was run every couple of days, by a kid, so like actually underweight, like for load wise, what like compared to like a full adult, say 100-pound kid, 120-pound kid. That's what most of its life was spent within when we owned it, or while we owned it. Now, it was young boys doing donuts and other stuff, so there was a bit of wear and tear, but still it's low, it's underweight, it's not really that abusive, but problem after problem after problem. Front end stuff falling apart, transmission came apart, partway apart, all kinds of engine issues after time went by. It's stuff you'd expect to see from a Chinese machine, like just stuff starts falling apart and hard to work on, except for the fact that the Chinese machines are easier to work on. It's like the philosophy is the same. You buy it, you run it, you sell it, you buy a new one. Just the difference being the Chinese ones have a shorter lifespan if you're not really that into repairing and upkeep, whereas the Polaris last a while longer. Sort of it's a proportion to price, it seems, but the Polaris is terrible. Terrible to work on in most cases. The only upside of this machine is I've done the carburetor on both of these. This one, if you undo both the clamps, you twist it back and forth. If you do it, you have to work it around a little bit, but effectively you can twist it, turn, pull it up through like that. But it's like a back and forth. It comes out in a weird way. That machine, the fuel tank has to come out, and that's all sorts of hassle. But then this machine has just unending issues. Even this machine. This Magnum developed a oil cooler leak. And this thing hardly gets to run at all. Sitting in the barn, like brass on copper, either brass or steels with the connector from the line to the through bolt. The through bolt would have the copper washers. Somehow that assembly developed a leak when the thing just was sitting. It makes no sense at all. So, like, just regardless of... I mean, that Magnum prize under 100 hours guaranteed. Possibly less than 50. Maybe around 50. Like, it's pretty low hours, though. It's just... Most of its life was gotten outrun very easily, nice and gentle. Half hour. Like, as years ago we got the thing. Like, one or two parents hop on, 2 kids, take a little cruise around the farm. That's it. Put it away, it sits for a couple weeks, get out again, do the same deal. Till now it's just mostly sits and gets an occasional ride around the woods. Sitting for months at a time. Even this Predator, just it's like made and advertised and sold as a race machine, but it's you compare it to, like, I think the engine might have been outsourced as well, but whoever made the motor didn't do a very good job. If you compare it to this Yamaha here, the engine's half the size, but it's only 50 cc's less. Or a lot of the parts are like half or 2/3 of the size. Most of the motor components are a fraction of the size. Valves, I don't say the valves are small, but it's like just sort of stuff's condensed and refined. A lot more polish to it, and it has an instantaneous throttle response, the likes you'll find in like a 150. It's ridiculous. Like the CRF 150R. This Predator is just slow, dopey, doesn't handle that great, hard to work on. You pull a side cover off, the gasket just falls apart, you can't reuse it. You know, the Yamaha, you pull the side cover off, if you don't damage the gasket, you put it back together and everything works fine. Just, it's like night and day between. I mean, people make a big deal, endorse, oh, we should make stuff in America, made in America, we need made in America, I need to support American companies. Well, this is what you get. In Harley's, the other case, which is even worse, like they were long subsidized, so they couldn't compete on their own. This is what's made in America. Garbage. From my experience with similar machines, garbage. Yamaha, old, has issues but it'll run. Old, has issues but it'll run. Yamaha, 08, nice machine, consistent runner. Abused by the previous owner, terribly abused. Easy to repair, so we'll sort it out. European bike, it had sat for a long time. Previous owner had a wheel bearing issue. I'm still working on getting that part, so it's just saying because I'm getting parts. And it's an obscure machine, so there's a little bit issue sourcing some parts, but great machine. No issues aside from just wear items like seals and bearings. Various other Japanese machines. Almost all have a stellar record that I've seen. Now, if you looked at classic, made in America, runs and runs and runs. Issues are few and far between. Even you can ignore issues and just keep running it. And it'll just keep trucking on as long as you keep oil, lubricant in it, and don't let junk into the engine and transmission. Kind of funny that at least the companies, to my understanding, Kubota is not an American company. They may make the tractors in America. I'm not sure about the specifics of that, but I'll take the farm over that Kubota any day. Irony of that. Even though the Kubota is a diesel with equal or greater horsepower. I think actually it's got I think that Kubota made like a 40 horse or something. 30, 40 with the Farmall is like 30 or less. What's Made in America getting us? I mean, you can compare welders. That corner's a Lincoln. That's a big name. Lincoln and Miller. Those are the two American brands everyone buys. They're all businesses get them. Well, I can buy an Everlast, and that's a good Everlast. Like, that's not at the top of the line, but that's up there in the price range and quality. I bought it. It's like a $1,500 welder. The same thing's probably a $4,000 welder from a Lincoln or Miller, or more possibly. So, we need to stop with some of this ideology of made in America, and we need to go where the quality is, where the best products are. Not keep goofing around and buying stuff because it's made in America, or buying it because it has a brand name that maybe once upon a time was good, but look at this machine. Like, just square. Like, they don't even, if you look at a lot of the fasteners, they're not a proper, it's self-tapping. So they weld together this frame, self-tapping ones, maybe it's self-tapped hole, a lot of these where the holes go in. It's a loose fit. It's limited use. If you thread it in and out so many times, there won't be anything left to thread into. Not to mention you actually have to torque it down like that. There's little to no thread you're trying to engage on. And a practically unserviceable carburetor. I mean, that's a big old bill to get this thing ripped out by a mechanic and done. In comparison to a contemporary machine from another manufacturer that's not carburetor enclosed on a ridiculously slanted engine. Like this crank on this engine. There's room under the crank where there's a bunch of just extra space for where they put in the oil pan. They could have expanded the oil pan outwards and made a low spot for the sump and lower the crank. That would have allowed you to put the motor more upright, leaving the carburetor easier to access. Or not had this, like, this motor's way too, I guess it's not down, I guess you say it's tall because it's not the sloped down if you call it long, but instead of it's a design that needs much refinement to be reduced into a more compact design. Instead, you just have excessive amounts of aluminum. It's just big, blocky. This is quite ridiculous. And the frame itself, it's nothing special. It's not like a tube frame you'd find in a lot of other, or at least more performance-oriented machines. It's just, let's use this type of metal stock. I don't know what the quality of the metal actually is, but that'd be interesting to have tested. Buy this stock, have a couple stamped and pressed into certain forms parts, welded together. Self-tapping screws most of the way around. I mean, there's not even a proper fastener on this fleece. It's just a little clip. Self-tapping screw into a little spring steel clip. I mean, it does work, but it's not really that high of a quality. If you're going for easy assembly, you can easily have a machine stamp on a piece of square, either threaded before or after, stamp on a piece of square with a square piece of steel with a hole drilled through it. You can tap it before or after having the machine like welded together. I mean, that's for what you're making this part. You can have a machine receive this part off the presses and weld it and then paint it, and off you go. Instead, they just have these little clips all over the place. Did I say I don't like Polaris? Do I need to repeat that point? But the only good thing they've done in this related industry is they got a big old jump start into the side-by-side market. They got that market up and going, and maybe their products are good compared to ours there, but they went aimed at the high performance market, and Yamaha blew them out of the water with a machine that had effectively a 3-cylinder street bike engine and manual sequential drive transmission. Even had the later, more recent models came out with some had automatic mechanical transmissions, other had driver controlled electronic shifting. Same deal with a paddle shifter on the steering wheel. That's pretty nice. No one else, to my knowledge, or what I've seen, has done anything comparable to that. I mean, the ones driving the market and technology forward, the American companies are not doing it in a lot of areas outside of sort of electronic tech. It's the Japanese and European markets and companies in off-road and automotive that they're pushing things forward for the most part. So I'm wondering how long it's going to be before, if Polaris goes out of business, or if they do get into trouble in the future, and if they'll get the Harley-Davidson treatment where politicians opt to hand them tax dollars or interfere with trade so that other foreign companies can't compete on even ground to try to protect native companies, as foolish as that is. Yeah, so it's not my machine. I'm working on it for someone else, and now I gotta spend 1 or 2 hours putting this carb back in, gas tank back in, and all the stupid stuff back together for this dumb machine. I mean, that one over there was a pesky thing to deal with, and it was a mess, but the carburetor went in and out without too much trouble. It was a gross piece of kit to work on because it was covered in muck, like grease, dirt, who knows what else. Don't know how a carburetor got that much like wet, like oil and whatever else was on it. This means this is dirty and dusty, but I don't get it. It's made like something's leaking on that. It's oil injection. Yeah, there's something wrong probably. It's Polaris. What else do you expect? Hard to work on. Lots of issues. At least when they're used for a while. Or just they have age to them. Actually, that brings up a fun topic. I have an uncle that has a Yamaha 200. One of like the early four-wheelers made. It's just 84 maybe? Something 80s. But it's not like the first year, but it's like after like 3 or 4 or 5 years of ATVs being made. So it has limited but fully there suspension. It's still not the really bad like some of the very early stuff had, but a couple inches of suspension on each wheel. A little 200. It's pretty much a 4-stroke blaster, but a little lower to the ground. Great machine. Gets run all the time. No issues, except for just like there are obvious ones with. Well, actually, even ironically, we never had an issue with the carburetor hardly. Didn't have ethanol issues. It never had issues with that. Gas never got turned off, but never got ethanol issues. I did take it apart once just to make sure everything was good, clean it up. That's because I actually had a bearing failure in the back end, but that wasn't the machine's fault. That was like just age and sitting. Somehow the one bearing got rust in it and ate itself up. The cage rusted apart and the bearing fell apart. And it's a shaft drive with slopes roller bearings in the back, and a pair of them, one to each side. So that had to be taken apart. It took me a little while to sort that, or just to figure it out, because I didn't understand what the machine was. But once you take it apart, you figure out how it is. It's easy enough to put back together once you know what you're doing. Unlike this, where it's just a mess. You think you can do it one way, it won't work, so you waste so much time, then you have to go, if you do it properly, take everything all apart to get one little part out. It's not like a nice Japanese machine where easy access to what you need. Not to mention, more problematic for less use. If you want a 4-wheeler, go Japanese. If you want a motorcycle, do not buy American. Well, mostly. There's a couple. Don't buy Harley. Some of the other brands aren't bad for American, to my knowledge. But of course, if you want anything performance, you should probably be looking for Japanese or European. That's probably enough of this for now. Kind of getting well far into the rambling and lacking a point. So let's end this.